The 90s rock music scene paved the way for some of the most influential subgenres of rock music to date. Many artists began changing their sound following the previous decade's success with power ballads, while others were just getting their start on their road to the Rock Hall of Fame. Grunge, nu metal, and punk pop became the genres to listen to and somewhat surprising staples in rock subgenres. Rock music became a fantastic mashup of different sounds throughout the decade that had a resounding effect on the generation. And here are the bands that were popular in the 90s. Nirvana. Nirvana was one of the most influential bands of the 90s decade, with their fusion of metal and punk sounds paving the way for the birth of grunge. Lead singer Kurt Cobain and bassist Chris Novoselic met in 1985, and began performing in bands together before they formed Nirvana in 1987 with Aaron Burkhardt, the original drummer, in Aberdeen, Washington. The band did not get their big start until they released their second album Nevermind in 1991. Drummer Dave Grohl had joined the band during the previous year. By 1992, Nirvana had topped the charts as #1 on the Billboard Top 200 Albums chart and had begun touring the EU. Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam exploded into the grunge scene with their 1991 debut album 10. Although the album didn't gain speed until the latter half of 1992, becoming known for its dark lyrics surrounding depression, loneliness and suicide. The band's success continued throughout the decade as they released another 4 albums. Pearl Jam encountered a few changes in its lineup over the years and faced some controversy through the grunge scene with Nirvana's lead singer Kurt Cobain. Cobain referred to Pearl Jam as a sellout and implied that they weren't truly an alternative band. However, the two bands did end up reconciling before Cobain's death in 1994. Soundgarden. Among the first in the grunge scene came Soundgarden, who were formed in 1985 but didn't see much success until their album Superunknown came out in 1994. They won 2 Grammys for their singles Black Hole Sun and Spoonman. The album included some of Soundgarden's best songs, with Black Hole Sun becoming one of their first #1 hits on the Billboard Top 200. The band chose to disband towards the end of the decade in 1997 due to exhaustion. But thankfully for fans, they reunited in 2010 and continued to play for 7 more years until leader Chris Cornell passed away. Metallica. Metallica's legacy began in 1983 when the band received its first record deal and produced the album Kill 'Em All. However, the band truly became a staple for American rock music after the release of their self-titled album in 1991, where they changed their sound from a harsh thrash metal style to a softer, much simpler hard rock style. Metallica's self-titled album became #1 across the globe almost immediately, winning the band American and MTV Music Awards, as well as a Grammy. Throughout the decade, the band released 4 more albums that sold millions of copies and included some of their most popular songs to date. Radiohead. The band Radiohead was formed in 1985 by guitarist and singer Tom York, guitarist Ed O'Brien, bassist Colin Greenwood, drummer Philip Selway and multi-instrumentalist Johnny Greenwood. The band, originally named On a Friday, didn't see very much early success until their name change and debut album Pablo Honey was released in 1993. Their single Creep quickly rose to number 34 on the Billboard Top 100 charts, and number 7 on the UK Singles Chart. Throughout the 90s, the band released 2 more albums closing the millennium with their most iconic album titled OK Computer, which won them a Grammy nomination in 1998. Weezer. The band Weezer formed in 1992 and saw almost immediate success after its first album release in 1994. Their self-titled album, often referred to as the Blue Album, rapidly became their best-selling album and is now certified quadruple platinum throughout the US and Canada. Their single Buddy Holly won multiple awards for Best Music Video and became a hit worldwide. They've continued releasing music ever since, with 14 more albums and 7 #1 hits in the US alternatives charts. Alice in Chains. Alice in Chains brought heavy grunge to the 90s by incorporating more metal themes into their sound than other bands of the decade. Alice in Chains originally came together in the early 80s. The band underwent many changes in lineup and names until the group finally settled on a band name in the late 80s, and began production of their first album, released in 1990, titled Facelift. Alice in Chains quickly became one of the biggest successes in grunge, as their single Man in the Box became a regular hit on MTV's music video rotation. By 1995, they released 3 more phenomenal albums before going on hiatus in 1996 due to member Lane Staley's battle with heroin addiction. Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses is one of the most iconic 90s rock bands, formed by Axl Rose and Tracy Guns in 1985 with other members, Izzy Stradlin, Rob Gardner and Ole Beach. The band went through a few lineup changes and experienced mass popularity and controversy throughout its early years, leading to threats of the members disbanding. In 1991, the band released Use Your Illusion I and Use Your Illusion 2, which quickly topped the charts, claiming both #1 and #2 spots. Even though the band continued to achieve success internationally, they were also experiencing massive amounts of fighting amongst each other. By 1995, most of the original members were gone. Red Hot Chili Peppers. The Red Hot Chili Peppers began making music in 1983 and released their first album in 1984. But they didn't really hit the mainstream until they released Blood Sugar Sex Magic in 1991, which included the single Give It Away and brought them to #1 on the Best Modern Rock charts. The Red Hot Chili Peppers found much more success following the addition of guitarist Dave Navarro in 1994. Navarro brought more funky, psychedelic guitar sounds to their heavy metal songs with the release of the album One Hot Minute and later Californication. U2. By the start of the 1990s, U2 had already experienced massive success from their debut album Boy, which came out in 1980. Riding that wave of success, the band decided to change their sound with the release of their album Ek Tung Baby in 1991. U2 then went on tour for 2 years around the world twice. U2 released 2 more albums throughout the 90s, making their electronic alternative sound classic for the decade. Then nothing new came until 2000, when they released 2-time Grammy Award winner All That You Can't Leave Behind. Foo Fighters. Drummer Dave Grohl formed Foo Fighters following the devastating loss of Nirvana's lead singer Kurt Cobain. Grohl recorded and produced the Foo Fighters' self-titled debut album with the intention of it being a solo project in 1994. The album got so much interest from record labels that Grohl decided to form a full-fledged rock band. The Foo Fighters became a full band lineup and released their second album The Color and the Shape in 1997. The band quickly became a mainstream staple for rock music and closed out the decade with their Grammy Award-winning album There Is Nothing Left to Lose. Green Day. Green Day began with a group of high school friends playing music together in 1987, but the band didn't explode until the release of their 1994 album Dookie. Their punk-pop sounds quickly became anthems for high schoolers across America, selling over 10 million copies and being featured as a regular MTV rotation. In 1996, the band released their next album Insomniac. This album did not bring as many sales as their previous album, but it did earn multiple nominations for the American, MTV and Grammy Music Awards. The album Nimrod, released in 1997, also won a music award for its single Good Riddance. Pantera. Pantera was founded in 1983, however the band had some difficulty realizing its sound. They did not truly find their place in the mainstream rock music scene until 1990, when they released their fifth album Cowboys from Hell, which became the album that transformed the band's sound from heavier metal into more of a mid-tempo thrash metal sound. Pantera's success took off as the decade progressed with the albums Far Beyond Driven in 1994 and The Great Southern Trendkill in 1996. Both albums received nominations for Grammy Awards. Wrapping up the decade came the band's fourth Grammy-winning album Reinventing the Steel, which became the band's final album. Blink-182. The wave of 90s punk brought Blink-182 into the rock music scene in 1995 with their first album release Cheshire Cat. Later that year, the band set off on its first tour in the States. In 1996, Blink released their second album Dude Ranch, which became quickly mainstreamed on radio stations nationwide. And in 1997, the band was featured on its first Warped Tour, becoming a household favorite among punk pop and skater fans everywhere. The band followed their success with their 1999 album Enema of the State, selling over 15 million copies and reaching number 6 on the Billboard Top 100 charts. Smashing Pumpkins. The Smashing Pumpkins entered the rock scene in 1991 with their first album Gish. The band featured a unique sound that mashed together heavy metal guitar themes with psychedelic and pop sounds. The band experienced some fighting among the members as they began recording their second album Siamese Dream, which landed number 10 on the Billboard Top 200 charts. Despite the band's internal fighting, in 1995 they released their third album Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which earned them several Grammy nominations, including Best Album of the Year.